Welcome everyone to the second session of our Education Funders Networking Group. I'm Katie Moore. I'm the CEO of the Virginia Funders Network, and I'd like to turn it over to Elliott Haspel and Gary Artybridge, our co-chairs for our networking group.
Great, thank you, Katie, and thanks to all of you for being here. Really excited for this session. If you all know me or Gary at all, you know that early childhood education is near and dear to our hearts. So Gary's going to talk very briefly about the goals and agenda for the session, and then I will talk a little bit about who we have with us, and then get started with the juicy parts.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second event. First event, we had a discussion about the state of education from early childhood all the way through higher learning. Today, we're going to dig a little deeper into the early childhood portion of it to really go through the challenges and opportunities that we have for philanthropy in early childhood. So our goal is to really figure out how can we make childcare more affordable, and how do we enhance early childhood education as a whole. So we're going to have a panel discussion with question and answers, and we're going to get the perspective from community partners, those that are in early childhood day to day, and also from our business community on the impact of early childhood in those respective areas. And then following that, we will have a presentation by Christa Jones from Virginia Promise Partnership to talk about the campaign that is going on to focus on affordable childcare for all Virginia families. And I will turn it back over to Elliott to introduce our panel.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. And I suppose I should say, for those who don't know me, I'm Elliott Haspel. I'm a program officer for education policy and research at the Robbins Foundation here in Richmond. And so, yes, we've got a great panel, and I want us to get to them. I don't think that this group in particular needs much convincing about the importance of early childhood education or the precarious moment, but also moment of opportunity that we're facing right now. And I'm really excited to hear this conversation. That's going to be moderated by Kathy Glazer, the president of the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, to get these different perspectives, and then to hear from Christa about the Virginia Promise Partnership, which I will say for my part, which is very biased, that I think is the most exciting and potentially transformative effort probably in Virginia's history when it comes to the early care and education system. So looking forward to y'all being able to hear more about that. In the interest of time and sort of reserving more time for content, what I'm going to do is drop bio links in the chat. So if you want to know more about these folks, you can click on those, but I think it's better to use the time to hear from them. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to get us started with our panel discussion.
Thank you, Elliott, and good morning to everybody. Great to see good veteran friends on the Zoom today, and a great day to talk about early childhood. We are in what I would call a now or never moment. And that has been the result of more widespread challenge with access to childcare, which has driven heightened awareness of its value, not just to individual parents, but to society, the community, and our economy. There's also growing recognition that the childcare system needs to be reimagined and made more equitable. And we also, in a very handy way, have access to an infusion of large but still not sufficient federal relief funding as a healthy start to that more durable system. Virginia has many advantages right now in this moment, including the efficiencies by consolidation of programs at the Virginia Department of Education, a new focus on a uniform measurement and improvement system for all publicly funded early learning programs, the upcoming launch of Ready Regions in every region covering Virginia's full footprint to complement the new, stronger state level infrastructure, increasing investment in Virginia Preschool Initiative and the scaling of mixed delivery program, temporary expansion and flexibility of the Child Care Subsidy Program, and of course the launch of the Virginia Promise Partnership as a result of the work of the Back to Work Virginia Task Force. In all of this, there is, of course, an outsized role for government to play, but it's also an opportune time to engage philanthropy, business and employers, and communities. And it's great to have the chance today to focus on both the challenges and the opportunities in this moment and the ways non-government organizations can participate and contribute to solutions. And in fact, philanthropy has played an important role in Virginia's early childhood systems building over many years. Many of you on the Zoom today have been part of that. And this is really important in terms of maintaining public-private approaches and a balance to our system. I'm really excited to learn today from our all-star panel, three of my favorite people in the world. And I'm going to turn to Tammy Mann first to get us started. Tammy, can you talk with us a little bit today about what childcare providers are experiencing currently in terms of staffing issues and other challenges, and then give us a sense of what impact that has on parents and children?
Certainly. Thank you so much, Kathy, for the opportunity to be here and to share. I'm just going to cut right to the chase. You know, hiring is absolutely at the core of what is making early care and education work, childcare, very challenging right now. For us, it has been challenging for a number of years because we live adjacent to Washington, D.C., and some of you may know that Washington has invested in universal preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds, and that dynamic has had a marked impact on our own staff retention, our ability to keep people we're investing in and training, because of course they can go across the bridge and work in DC and have access to greater compensation. And compensation is absolutely at the heart of what's making things very challenging. COVID has certainly made it more acute. We have openings for both our infant toddler teachers as well as preschool teachers. We have the capacity to serve over 600 children under 5 in the programs that we operate. And it is a constant challenge to find people with the skills that are required to do the work that needs to be done to ensure that children have access to high quality learning experiences and parents can stay involved in work. As an agency, even before COVID, you know, we were doing a lot to try and grow our wage support for our staff. We had been doing, you know, one-time bonus payments as well as changing base payments year over year, having to fundraise to really make that a reality for our staff. Certainly with the pandemic, we've, you know, had to introduce hiring bonuses in addition to retention, just to try and compete with some of the other industries that are obviously have more capacity to do a lot more than nonprofit organizations such as ours have to do. The impact of actually recruiting staff is enormous. We're now thinking that we're going to have to find a way to access more support to actually have charge of just this function, because the level of work involved in screening and interviewing, and you know, you get somebody in, somebody goes, and sometimes they're going because of the stress that they're under personally in their own lives, or they're challenged with their own children's school situation. If, you know, they find themselves quarantined and they can't come in or something. I just cannot underscore the level of stress that our staff are under. This year was the first year I actually had to, you know, I felt like I need to say this to help my staff understand that I know we may come to a point where we're going to have to close a classroom. I didn't want people to feel overwhelmed with the reality of that if we're not able to, you know, recruit enough subs to staff classrooms. If people are out and sick, we have a lot of our subs that are actually acting in either assistant capacity or teacher capacity as a result of having vacancies. And so that has an impact when someone has to go out. And so I crafted a letter to our parents across all of the programs we're administering here. And I just had to be brutally honest about, the challenges that are ahead of us this year. We're not exempt from the same labor market pressures that many other sectors are experiencing. And while we understand the devastating impact of having inconsistent care can have for your families, we can't promise that we're not going to be in a position this year where we may have to close a class if we're not able to staff that class. With management staff, they also go into the classrooms when we have vacancies. So there is an enormous amount of stress that's being experienced. We've actually introduced an opportunity outside of EAP assistance for our staff to have monthly support. Those that want to avail themselves of it with a mental health professional that's been able to help address stress management and how to take care of themselves as they're trying to educate and support other children, and we're really working very, very hard to contend with the hiring pressure. Kathy asked about, so what effect is this having on parents and children, right? I mean, we know that the stress of not being able to have consistent care puts parents in jeopardy in terms of their own livelihood, which then puts children in jeopardy. Children experience the stressors that families experience when there is instability in work. And it shows up in the classroom. We have so many more 4-year-old children that are experiencing regulation challenges, the number of students that are not potty trained. This is a very new element that our preschool teachers are having to contend with that they've not really had to contend with for a long time. And so the whole regulation and helping children, very young children, manage the impact of just the instability that a lot of families are experiencing right now is acute. And so, I always felt before COVID, our sector was very much increasingly on the brink of unraveling, given the cost of care. And COVID has definitely put us on life support. And the scary thing is we know that there are some agencies, some businesses that are not going to survive as a result of it, because there comes a point where if you can't get people in to do the work, something's got to give. And a lot of times the things that give is people decide to close their doors, and then we have limited access to something that we know will have reverberating impacts in our economy. And so it's challenging right now, more challenging than it's ever been for our sector. And I, for one, I don't know if it was Elliott or Kathy that said this. I definitely feel like Virginia is on the cusp of a real inflection point with being able to help transform how our sector is operating for, families with children, as well as the professionals who are committed to serving them. And I'm really excited to have an opportunity to be a part of this conversation this morning and making sure that you all understand, we need philanthropy to be all in on this as we try and push this very aggressive agenda around transforming childcare in the Commonwealth.
Kathy, are you there? Are you frozen? Oops. Okay. Kathy looks like she might be frozen. Thank you, Tammy. I've got the question sheet, so I can also, while Kathy reconnects, grab in real quick. So thank you very much, Tammy. It is a stark, and I appreciate the honesty of the situation at the moment. So Kathy, are you back?
I am back.
All
Sorry
right,
about
cool.
that.
No worries.
Appreciate that. And speaking of internet challenges, we're going to turn to the southwest corner of the state now. And I join you, Elliott, in sort of thanking Tammy for, raising up really candid issues that are going on, especially in the DC area, based on some of those pressures from the DC universal pre-K. But I think she also heightened some things that we're seeing happening around the state as well. And I'm curious, Travis, about how this whole childcare crisis is showing up in a very rural area. What else do we need to think about in your neck of the woods?
Thank you, Kathy, and good morning. It is quite challenging times, but such an opportunity for parts of rural Virginia as well as the Commonwealth as a whole. The rural parts of the Commonwealth, I would say, even before the pandemic, were working toward solutions and partnerships, and thank goodness we had things and the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation before the pandemic really working to build those public-private partnerships that kind of enabled us to be able to respond and react to the situation in the pandemic. I'd say for information purposes, just a little bit of background, we are talking about a 21 different locality footprint for Southwest Virginia, 21 different counties and cities, 7,000 square miles, 500,000 in population, so very rural when you consider that's about 20% of the land mass of the Commonwealth. In the early phases of the pandemic, it was very reactive and responsive. Child care centers were closing down. Families and caregivers were reluctant to put their children in care because nobody knew what this disease was like or the transmission and everything there. But we also got to think about those first responders, those essential workers, healthcare, hospital, fire, EMS, retail, grocery, all of those things. In parts of rural Virginia, specifically Southwest Virginia, of our labor force, more than half of our current labor force work hourly jobs, not salary. So those hourly workers, unless they're in the restaurant business that closed down, they can't work remotely. They can't watch their child at home and still perform and do their job. They have to physically go in. So during the early parts of the pandemic, it was really around market stabilization and building capacity for those child care centers to remain open, to have the supplies they needed. I'm sure several of you know you couldn't even get certain supplies in a grocery store. So how does a child care center get milk to feed children during the day? So we were working with grocery store associations and vendors and suppliers to stabilize that market. But really, when you think about rural communities, there was lack of access to begin with in certain communities. So now they also have lack of after-school care programming. So when you take even early childhood education and they close their doors, essential workers need that assistance. Most of our workforce can't work remotely, and throw in the mix of the K-12 closures. Now you really have a problem with childcare, which I think has really brought the attention that's well needed and so excited about from the business community to now say, wow, we really have to have childcare available in order for our workforce to continue to be gainfully employed and do their work. When we think about all of the market stabilization, we've had great success working with the foundation, Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, working with the local Department of Social Services to keep those doors open. As we continue to move toward the recovery and really the building back phases from this pandemic, we've got a tremendous amount of opportunity ahead of us, but a lot of work still yet to be done. One of my recent board members that is an HR manager of a significant size manufacturing organization said the best labor you have is the one you already have. You don't want to lose the employees you have. Some of the best child care workers we have are the ones we have, and we don't want to lose them. Retention right now is one of the biggest challenging things in child care and recovery around the workforce. It is the market competition for hourly workers is significant. If you're an hourly worker right now, you could probably name your job, your occupation, your hours of employment. People are that desperate and need those employees. So we're not only competing with trying to build a workforce in early child care, we're also competing with other businesses and organizations that pay more of a competitive wage. So I still think that there are a lot of mathematical issues involved in early childhood education that if we raise the rate, ultimately the end user pays for that increase on the parent or the caregiver. So we've got a lot of work to do there. We also know that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity and investment that has been put forth toward market stabilization, but also when we think about recovery and building back, the biggest challenge that we are really asking ourselves right now, how do you take millions of dollars of investment and invest those wisely to get the most significant return on that investment that you can get, but also to make something sustainable and get the length of that investment. What we don't want to see is this huge curve of investment that all of a sudden we build all these resources and programs and support that then just have this cliff effect in 36 months when federal dollars, state dollars run out. So I think there is a lot of opportunity for public-private partnerships. Philanthropy needs to be a key role in that. And the challenge is around that sustainability piece as well. So how do we work together in these partnerships to really make sure that we're investing more in infrastructure and systems and processes that would sustain past any grant or any, daily activity need that who knows what 36 months looks like from now and what investment will be there. So that's a particular piece that I encourage everyone to think about is how can we make those investments have that length of life to them as well as that long-term investment and return on that investment as well. So lots of interesting things in the space right now happening. We also are unique that nearly every bit of public and private partnerships and regional efforts in Southwest Virginia are really coordinated from a regional capacity. We have built a collective system to work with several school systems, to work with more than 200 childcare providers, to work with businesses and organizations, all making sure that we have a common agenda and align our efforts to work together. Because of that capacity and because of that regionalization of our work, it positioned us very well in the early part of the pandemic to be able to respond and build that market stabilization. But it also makes our community very well prepared to collaborate and work together on some of the next steps as we continue to grow and build our childcare supply, but also continue to work together on doing that.
Thank you, Travis. It is remarkable what has been built in that large landmass in Southwest Virginia. And I think some of what you're saying is such a reminder of how varied our communities and our regions are across the state. So it will be really important that the system that we build is able to be responsive to the strengths and assets as well as the needs in every community. We'll circle back to you in a few minutes, Travis, but want to turn to Bill Ermatinger now and ask you about the impact of the childcare crisis that you're seeing on businesses and on Virginia's economy.
Thanks, Kathy, and thanks for having me here. I think the first step to solving any problem is that we got to admit that there is one. I still think that there has to be energy in that. And just to throw out a couple stats, right? So Virginia now ranks 33rd nationally in preschool funding. And as a result, 24% of economically disadvantaged 4-year-olds and 72% of economically disadvantaged 3-year-olds lack access to quality preschool. That's simple. 75% of all of Virginia's early childhood programs that receive actual public funding, they don't even participate in the state's voluntary quality measurement system. Now, these stats are really reflective of the fact that nearly 100,000 kids enter kindergarten classrooms each year in the state of Virginia. And only 60% of those start school with the key literacy, math, and social economic skills needed to be successful. But that's the problem statement. So we all have to make sure that we're on that same problem that we're trying to solve. So how does that manifest itself as a concern for business? A 2-year MBA class really boils down to a simple fact that all businesses on the planet need 3 things to be successful. They got to have access to capital, they have to have access to technology, and they have to have access to labor. It's that simple. It's not complicated to be successful in business when you have all 3 of those. Now, we've all been hearing for the past decade is about our labor shortfalls. So let me be clear, we really don't have a labor shortage. We have enough people for all the jobs that are needed in the United States. We just don't have the right skills needed. So we have a skill shortage, not a people shortage. And I think that's important, another important distinction that we all need to agree on. Now, this issue of early childhood and the criticality of it, as Kathy knows, I've been involved in this for about 15 years, has been evolving in the business community over some time. You know, early on in this debate, I would talk to other business leaders around the Commonwealth and frankly, around the United States where we have other operations. And I would say most businesses kind of viewed this issue as a social one. You know, something that elected officials should fix if they wanted to. And in addition, you know, some business leaders kind of said, you know what, Bill, this is a problem for the future. It's not my problem today. I'm trying to worry about the next quarter, not 20 years from now when a kid is in preschool. So you know what, I hear you, I get it, but I don't have the energy for it. Now today, I can honestly say that most business leaders, they indeed believe that this is now a business imperative. And frankly, that it's too important just to be left for the government to fix alone. Hence the involvement, I think, of the business community. As testament to that, the Virginia Chamber, you know, our own Commonwealth Chamber, in the last 3 blueprints of their strategy document, so that covers the last 15 years. And when Barry Duvall, the president of the chamber, goes around the Commonwealth and has talked to thousands of business leaders, quality and affordable care has been one of the top issues facing businesses as it relates to workforce development. So it's great that they're getting on board with this. Now, in our current crisis, Kathy, as you were asking me, COVID did highlight a lot of things for us as a society over the last 18 months. And I've heard some of the other speakers, you know, talk about it. I mean, it showed us all the cracks in our infrastructure, like our supply chain disruption. But it has really highlighted how fragile and critical our childcare infrastructure is in this country. You know, once schools and childcare facilities closed, our employees, even Huntington Ingalls, I got 45,000 employees right now. Our employees had no choice but to stay at home, even if they wanted to come to work. You know, nobody was going to leave a 3 or 4-year-old home alone. They shouldn't, and they can't, right? So for those business leaders that really felt that, hey, Bill, this is a future problem, it's 20 years away, they now have realized it is a problem of their current workforce and a problem of their future workforce. And I think the Pentagon, believe it or not, it's kind of a weird that the Pentagon would come out with this, but the Pentagon, I think, said it best. And Kathy, you've heard me say this before. The Pentagon testified that the biggest military crisis that this nation faces. Now, when I was listening to the testimony, I was ready for them to say China, Russia, North Korea, you know, some other threat that we, you know, that we see about on CNN and our news every night. They actually said it was recruitment. They said it was recruitment. And they indicated that they cannot recruit 25% of all eligible citizens due to educational limitations. They cannot recruit another 25% due to physical limitations. And they can't recruit another 25% due to criminal limitations. So that leaves our armed forces, and that's what they were testifying to, with only 25% of the remaining population that they would even be qualified to join the armed forces, let alone the challenge of trying to encourage those new workers to join the armed services. And so as we were, as an employer sitting there listening to this testimony, I'm thinking, oh my God, that's my same 25% too. So we're all going after that same 25%. And I think we now got to start working on that other 75%. How is it that we can convert that 75% into that 25% and make it larger? Pre-COVID, when unemployment in this nation and the Commonwealth was running 3 or 4%. And in the last 5 years, HI, we've hired about 30,000 employees. And I still didn't have enough people for the jobs. So unemployment's running 3 or 4%. At Newport News facility right here at the shipyard here in Virginia, 2 miles down the road, I was talking to Mayor McKinley, and the mayor said in downtown Newport News, his unemployment rate is 28%. So how is it that 2 miles away from my largest shipyard, I have a 28% unemployment rate, and I'm hiring and I can't fill it? So that is really the problem of today. That is why businesses are impacted. And so I think we got to stop acting surprised that we have a labor problem when we already know that year after year after year in the Commonwealth, 40,000 kids are starting kindergarten unprepared. And then that just perpetuates itself through the entire educational system. And then we're trying to repair, fix, modify, skill set, whatever, when they turn 18 or 19. I think we all need to spend a lot more energy on the 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds as a business community. One, to help our current employees, which this crisis pointed out, but also the future. So huge impact. Labor is the biggest impact for businesses. In the last 15 years, like I said, to be successful, access to capital, technology, and labor. There is so much liquidity in this marketplace since 2008 that the feds have dumped into the market. If a business needs money, it's easily readily available. Technology, we're the leading technology sector in the entire global on the planet for technology. So technology is not a problem to be successful. Capital is not a problem. It's labor. And I think that's where we got to spend our time and energy on.
Thank you, Bill. As you were talking, I was thinking about the conversations from the Back to Work Task Force over last summer. And one of the things that we talked about was swim lanes of responsibility and thinking about the role of government as well as the role of community and employers and philanthropy. And so today we'll have a chance to talk about the role of philanthropy with some of this. But Bill, just wondering from your view, what's the role of business and the corporate community moving forward, specifically around this childcare issue?
Honestly, I definitely business has to be at the table. And like I said in the beginning, it's evolved. Originally, business wouldn't even participate being at the table. They really didn't feel that this was a problem for business to handle. It was a social problem. It was a governmental problem. It was not a business. So the first thing was to get them at the table. And I think, at least in the Commonwealth, we have conquered that problem. Some states are still struggling with that, as you well know, Kathy. So getting business at the table, talking with the elected officials, talking with also the providers. The providers that are surrounding the employers need to know, what do employers need to do to help them? Is it working more on a flexible policy because they know that they're going to have to be open later or different hours? So I just think it's the conversation between all of those partners at the table, rather than everyone going into their silo and trying to fix it through their own lens, rather than through a holistic lens. And like I said, it's going to take, government can't fix this alone, business can't fix this alone, communities can't fix this alone. This is the one issue where everybody has to come to the table. So who's going to be that force mechanism to get everybody at the table? And I think that's what the Commonwealth has been working on in the last 2 years with your leadership, Kathy, and others, of how do we make sure that everybody at the table has a voice, has their concerns, that we can solve this collectively.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that perspective. I'd love to jump back to Travis and talk a little bit again from the perspective of our regions, and particularly the rural regions. Can you talk a little bit, Travis, about what kind of opportunity you see in something like a Ready Regions model, where there is a regional infrastructure that complements and relates to the state level structure? Just wondering what you think the role of that sort of convening table at the regional level can have.
Sure. I think it's quite the opportunity for that collective effort. I talked to several other organizations across the Commonwealth and consistently hear of their jealousy of the region's collaboration that we have in Southwest Virginia. And you think about, if everyone's kind of in their silos and they're doing everything, there's no cross-pollination, and any part of that fabric isn't really woven together as well and as strong. Being able to serve from a regional and combined capacity, one, really brings organizational capacity to the table in order to have that community champion that is going to work on this the day in and day out and has the adequate resources to do so, but also has the ability to combine and layer and leverage those resources with one another. So if you have programs that participate in, such as in Virginia Quality, can they participate in mixed delivery? Can we braid several different supports and layers around those efforts to make them stronger? It also is the unique opportunity, several of you know in your own communities, people travel and commute these days. They may live in one county and go to the city to work. They may drive through, especially in rural areas, 2 counties before they get to their place of employment as well, depending on where their child goes during the day. So having that regional collaboration specifically with regional communities is very important as well, even from a communication strategy and thinking about collective impact, not just alignment, but also those mutually reinforcing activities. So being able to take several layers of support and technical assistance and really provide those wraparound services to childcare providers, to children, as well as even to the families. We have seen such great success instead of just being this little silo does this and they're helping these 10 organizations, and then this group has this particular project and they're helping a different 10. If we don't look at it from a holistic approach, we're really still just piecemealing everything together, and that is, it's still important, but it's going to take a lot longer to really get where we need to go. So by having those collective and combined collaborative efforts really tends to strengthen the network and the system to truly create a real early childhood system of public and private partnership.
Thank you, Travis. Appreciate that. Our time's growing short, so I think, and I don't see any questions from the audience in the chat, so I'm just going to keep asking questions and going to kind of turn to maybe a rapid fire round and see if I could get each of our 3 speakers to answer these questions. One, what is the main policy lever that you think we need to trigger to really help fix the structural problems that we have with the system in Virginia? And what's the threat to Virginia if we don't act now? Tammy, with that, I'll ask you to get started.
Well, I think some of the very exciting work that the Virginia Promise Partnership, and I know Christa's going to be talking about that very shortly, but I think the effort to really focus on where there can be a public-private sort of funding structure to address financing. And we know that obviously some of the federal funds that flow into the state offer an opportunity to do that through subsidy assistance. But I also think, just, you know, based on the stat that Bill articulated in the chat, that the state is also going to have to really significantly increase its stake in this financially as new revenues come in from new strategies that have been created in Virginia, that we need to really be looking at where some of those resources can be set aside to really help us address the financing side of our system, which is truly broken. The market rate approach is not working, especially as we're focusing on making sure that all children, especially those living on the margins, have access to an opportunity to really benefit from having a high quality early learning experience. So I feel like the state is going to have to do more to really help us change that dynamic. You know, I also noted, this isn't a policy lever, but I do wonder, as we think about the need for diverse financing, sort of where could the business community be in helping to sort of support that mixed, you know, financing approach, where there are opportunities particularly for businesses that are margin-based, where there is a way to contribute to this as families are needing to access these kinds of services to remain employed. Where do we kind of see that as an element that could also be very helpful, in addition to flexible times that, again, Bill articulated. But the financing piece for me is there's a huge opportunity given the money that is presently available and will become available based on some laws that have been passed to, legalize certain kinds of activities to generate revenue. So.
Thank you, Tammy. Appreciate that. Travis, your turn. So one policy lever we need to pull, and then also the threat to Virginia if we don't act now.
Yeah, I think we still need to continue to build access to early child care. Universal pre-K is quite an interesting concept that we are following and watching. It would have a huge impact on affordability and access and quality, but it also can have an impact on current providers in the private sector. From the business model, most providers are sustainable. They earn and keep their revenues profitable because of the 3s and 4s. The infants and toddlers are not really what keeps the business afloat. If those businesses are then only geared toward infants and toddlers, that may create some challenges for their business to remain open, access, availability. So I think we've got to really look into universal pre-K, but really look into how we can do that in a public-private partnership. And we have been working aggressively there as well. But I think it's a wonderful opportunity. We just really need to think through how we get there.
All about mixed delivery. Thank you, Travis. Bill, it's your turn now. I'll ask you the same questions, and I think someone's also put in the chat for you a question. Bill, certainly important that business is at the table. Does business have an actionable plan to get us where we need to be? No pressure.
No pressure. So let me take your first question first. What do I see the need? And there's a lot of recommendations out there, but I'll summarize it basically in 3 buckets. And I think one of them, again, thanks to Kathy and others, one has already been accomplished. So first, we got to maximize all our funding streams, right? There is money from early Head Start to Head Start to Child Care and Development Block Grants, IDEA. There is a lot of federal money out there, and we need to make sure that we maximize all the funding that's available for this problem. Second, we got to require measurement to improve child outcomes. It's that simple. It's not daycare. It's about improving the child outcomes. We got to have measurements that everybody can agree with flexibility from each region that's going to have their own uniqueness. I think that's also important. It can't just be one set of goals or metrics that is applied everywhere. And then the third, the one that's been kind of accomplished, we have been arguing in the Commonwealth that we need to have one agency that was really heading up this problem, and now it's in the Virginia Department of Education. It's been split over the years, and now that's come together. To answer the question in the chat room, what are businesses doing? Again, this is just not a business problem to solve. It's all of us being partners, and I'll give you one good example of how businesses can be a partner. It's not the total solution. So again, our operations at Newport News, Mayor McKinley approached us, Huntington Ingalls, and said, the city council has agreed that they're going to build a means testing, high quality preschool facility in downtown Newport News. But we can't do it alone. Will you as business and the business community and philanthropies join us? And we are. We're going to help build it. We're going to help create funding for it. But here is a great partnership where business, the philanthropy, which was the community foundation, and the city council have come together to try to solve this problem in this own little unique community of Newport News. That has to be replicated everywhere in the state of the Commonwealth. That absolutely has to be replicated.
Thank you, Bill. Really appreciate it. Just want to thank all of our panelists for the great comments today. And we're going to turn to a presentation by Christa now, but hopefully the panelists can stay on in case there more questions that come up for you all later in the session. Thanks to all of you, Tammy, Travis, and Bill. I'm delighted to now introduce Christa Jones, who's the director of the Virginia Promise Partnership. Christa comes to us having worked in politics and advocacy for more than 20 years. I think she started when she was 5, and working for members of Congress as well as in political campaigns, advocacy, and lobbying. As we build out the Promise Partnership, these are exactly the kinds of areas of expertise where we need to build strength as we begin our decade-long march to secure quality, affordable childcare for all Virginians. Since he joined our team in April, Christa just jumped right in and has helped the coalition already make great strides. Would love to turn to Christa now and hear about her vision and plans for guiding the Virginia Promise Partnership's efforts. Christa.
Yes, thank you, Kathy, so much for that introduction. And like I think both you and Elliott said earlier, we are really at the crux of something powerful with the Virginia Promise Partnership. So I think all of us should really just feel honored to really be in this space right now at the beginning or the next step in this important movement. And really now is the time to seize this opportunity. As we all know, well, every year is an election year in Virginia. We all know that this is a gubernatorial year, and obviously the governor will have a pretty significant impact on what we're able to accomplish. So now is the time to really be influential in terms of meeting our bold goal. So I think, so the bold goal, and it's really key, and I'm really excited, we'll talk, Kathy referenced the Back to Work Task Force about the recommendations they had, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But I think the idea that we do have this bold goal is really, really important. And as was also said earlier, you know, Virginia is at the forefront of this, to have the promise of quality, affordable childcare for all Virginia families by 2030. And the Back to Work Task Force convened back last April to consider how to rebuild a more resilient system. I think it was also really important that we had some pretty key stakeholders at the table. Stephen Moray, President and CEO of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, Jim Dyke, Senior Advisor at McGuire Woods Consulting and former Secretary of Education in Virginia, and then Dr. Deborah DeCroce, the President and CEO of the Hampton Roads Community Foundation. And their influence, I think, is really paves the way for a lot of us on this call who want to do more with childcare. That influence in terms of the key stakeholders in Virginia, in terms of who will move this issue forward, is going to be very important in addition to a lot of other things. And so, like we say, the task force included representatives from a lot of different sectors, and I'll talk more in a second about the importance of having that diverse coalition. The task force recommended that we embrace a bold goal and a vision, which we have, develop a strategic business plan for innovations and investments, and to create structures to sustain focus, commitment, and urgency. And so for me as the director, you know, some of my priorities include a focus on collaboration. I think a lot of us realize, and has been referenced earlier, that there sometimes has been a lot of siloed work in this sector. While a lot of us bring a lot to the table, it was important that we finally get together and collaborate if we were going to reach this bold goal. Also, transparency. You know, this is really important to me. We need to be clear with all of our stakeholders along this journey of where we are, where we need help, where we're being successful, both internally in the coalition and in the public. So transparency is going to be critical. Grassroots engagement is so very important. And I'll talk about that in a moment as well. But you know, how we work with our providers and parents and make sure their voices are heard, how we train our advocates and make sure at a drop of a hat that they can communicate to their legislators. This is all very important in this process of reaching the bold goal. Innovation, to me, that seemed natural. Again, I think while we bring a lot of expertise and experience, a lot of different organizations in this sector, sometimes things can get stayed with anyone, not just with us. So as we start out with this bold goal, we need to continue that innovation to 2030 and beyond. And that needs to be a tenet that we follow, to continuously be on the cutting edge and be innovative. And then elevating the brand is going to be critical. I mean, I know a lot of us have seen a lot more news articles and just attention around childcare because of the pandemic. There's obviously concerns even with the brand of what an early childhood educator is or a child care worker is. We have to continuously, in the public's minds and our stakeholders' minds and legislators' minds, we have to continuously think about how we can just raise the public consciousness and image of who we are. So we have a diverse coalition of 30+ organizations. We are so proud, that when we were created, we realized that it was going to be critical that we bring all these diverse voices to the table. And here you can see who they are, ranging from the Virginia Chamber to the Virginia Education Association, just all organizations who bring a lot to the table. And it's so powerful to see how we intersect around childcare. We all represent a lot of different interests, but we come together around this one singular issue. So data collection is also going to be extremely important in the work that we do. And so we conducted a poll, an online poll back in April of last year. And we polled 600 registered voters from across Virginia. And we had some really important, which may seem like obvious findings, but with the data collection and to be able to show that this is where people's minds were was really important, especially at this point in the pandemic. So childcare is important to Virginians. That's very clear. 82% say early childhood education is important to them. Virginians face several challenges with childcare, and 62% say the cost is too expensive. Again, this is something that a lot of people realized, but it was important that we have the poll results to back this up. And in summary, with the poll, we found that access to quality childcare will be a key issue in Virginia's 2021 elections. Early childhood education maintains strong bipartisan support, and Virginians are looking to their elected officials and policymakers to take action. We also, in addition to the polling results, we did data profiles to make sure, again, that on the ground, our stakeholders and our partners had data to support the issues that they were facing around childcare. So when we talk to legislators, we talk to the media, it's really important that we have these facts and figures in addition to our stories to back us up. And so this is just an example in Fairfax County. So one of the key, obviously, when you think about, okay, you say you're gonna get quality affordable childcare by 2030, well, what exactly does that mean? And so our policy, our plan development subcommittee led by Elliott on the call has been doing a great job just to try to figure out exactly what that's gonna look like. And we have every step of the way, we have engaged our partners, we've engaged our providers, and we've engaged our parents. So these are just some of the principles that we are taking into consideration when we figure out what this policy roadmap and cost estimate looks like. Everything from equity, the importance of removing systemic inequity from the system. Again, there's transparency again, that we have to make sure families can easily access information about childcare providers. In fact, in some of the meetings with our parents, that theme has come up several times, just how, and the fact that different parents want different things in terms of quality, but we need to make sure we're transparent in how to just get that information out to them. So our final policy roadmap will definitely include suggestions for that. Access, we want to make sure that families have access to childcare. Quality, we want to make sure that providers receive what they need to ensure quality student-teacher interactions. Of course, obviously, we want to make sure it's affordable, stable, and that childcare workers are compensated equally, that their worth is valued. So in terms of advocacy, I said earlier that our grassroots operations are really going to be the cornerstone of the work that we do. Like I mentioned, we're going to need, at the drop of a hat, we're going to have our advocates be able to step in and make sure their voices are heard, like I said, through 2030 and beyond. So we have done several trainings. We're partnering with Save the Children Action Network. We've also been involved in federal advocacy around the American Families Plan to secure the highest amount possible for childcare. So we've been had targeted meetings with some of our Virginia congressional delegation. Communications with any organization, communications is obviously going to be extremely important. Like I mentioned earlier, there is a lot more in the news, on social media about the childcare crisis, but I think for us, it's also important to make sure the different stories are told, the different angles are told. So as we talk through, how we're going to roll out our roadmap, which should be available pretty soon, we need to figure out how to communicate that to different audiences and the voices that they need to hear. And so communications is a very, very central part of the work that we do. As I mentioned earlier, our parents and providers are the central part of all of this work. Tammy is actually the lead for our provider advisory. She's doing an excellent job. And we just want to make sure that their voices are heard, that they have feedback in every step of the process. So we don't want to come up with a plan where the parents and providers' voices haven't been clearly heard. In terms of action and next steps, there are a few things that we would love for those of you on this call to do, and just overall in the philanthropy sector. Definitely make the promise. So we have our coalition partners, but we also have individuals and organizations who have just stood up and said that they support reaching this bold goal, and just in general. We also encourage you to be an ambassador. As you are updated on the latest in childcare, like you are on this call, and then other circles and other resources that you have, please continue to share that information with your networks. I mean, you have a certain level of influence, and sometimes we don't realize it. That's really key if we're going to build continual awareness and support for the bold goal. And then accountability, keep us accountable throughout this journey to 2030 and beyond. If we're going to reach the bold goal, we'll all need to work strategically and continuously progress towards that goal. And then lastly, your relationships with key stakeholders. I think all of us, sometimes we don't even realize how strong our networks are. So whether it's with community leaders, legislators, the media, we ask you to continually talk about childcare when possible, and the need for us to have continued advocacy around childcare. So that is the end of my presentation. And I'm not sure who I'm going to turn it over to, maybe back to Kathy next.
Yeah, thank you, Christa. Wow, you are perfectly on the dot of your time frame. Thank you for so quickly and so well sharing the vision and the opportunities with the Virginia Promise Partnership. I think, on your last note, when you were suggesting ways that this audience can get plugged in and participate, I first want to just take a moment to say that some of you have already stepped out and are supporting some of this transformative work. Really grateful to Adjuvan's Foundation, to the Robbins Foundation, Community Foundation for Greater Richmond. And so many of you have also been just terrific partners over the years, and I know will continue to contribute to the efforts ongoing in Virginia. I think I'd love to ask our panelists and Christa sort of perhaps one more round of questions about specifically, are there ways that philanthropy can provide a role, or can, I know you had some suggestions, Christa, but are there other ways that that folks can begin to think about, what's the most effective way to partner and to contribute? I think, we know that there are a number of different constituencies that can, serve a really catalytic role. And we'd just like to spend the next few minutes talking about what role that could be for philanthropy. I'll maybe ask our panelists first to answer if they have thoughts on that, and then I'll
I think Kathy froze again for a second. Okay, well, so question was, yes, what philanthropy can do to support this? So Tammy, I know you have to run, so thank you so much for your input and your hard work here and what you're doing on behalf of kids and the community. So thank you. While Kathy's coming back on, Travis, can we start with you on that one?
Sure. I think there's several roles that philanthropy can play. One thing in particular, we're very blessed in Southwest Virginia, where we have a combined portfolio of all these partners and public and private partnerships. We have the capacity, but in some communities, there's lots of grants to do the work and help the agencies and the child care centers themselves and buy the curriculum. But there's sometimes often the void of who pays for the coordination, who pays for the backbone, who pays for the entity to eat, sleep, breathe early childhood education and work on that every day. And I think that's a role that philanthropy understands, especially major foundations, that there has to be some coordination and collaboration and accountability to that work. We talk about, we want measures, we want accountability. somebody has to own that work. And so I do think there are voids in several communities where there is not really coordinating capacity dollars. Dollars sometimes are so restricted toward the program itself or to the work itself that no one wants to pay for the overhead. And so I would encourage everyone to kind of have an open lens and thought to that and really understand that somebody has to coordinate and have capacity to do that as well.
Thank you, Travis. Let me turn now to Tammy, see if she has thoughts.
Tammy had to go, and so did, I think, Bill. So
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
that hard stop, that hour ran up on us. Yep.
Elliott, maybe I'll turn to you and see if you have thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, we could start. No, I mean, I think, and Kathy, you mentioned the Robbins Fund. Oh, Shannon has a hand raised. So let me, before I answer, go over to her. Shannon, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to jump in front, but I have some thoughts about that. I mean, so from the National Early Childhood Funders Collaborative, pretty much what we think about all the time is how funders can work in this space. And it's a really interesting time right now because for the first time, there is some public money, like more than we've had in the past. And yet hearing Tammy, who I've known for 20 years, I mean, I would have told you we were in a crisis the whole 20 years that I've been working in this. And then to hear her description of where we are right now was so sobering, with some public money coming in for rescue plans. So what we're thinking about is how private money can goose the public money toward A, being sustainable, and B, being equitably implemented, which is, interesting. One is, I would say we always encourage our funders to fund advocacy in recognition that there's not, y'all could add up all the money you got. I've got Gates, I've got RWJ, we could add up all their money and we wouldn't have enough money to fund the system, right? So advocacy. And then in terms of equitable implementation, we're starting to think about things like, okay, if there are deserts, and there was to be public money, and I think this is a whole new conversation. If we got the families plan, we'd have to, I'd want to sit with y'all again, but who's in a position to expand their businesses and to really move into these deserts, right? And it'll be like for-profits and startups. So what about all the women-owned businesses that are already there? Are we partnering with them to put them in a position to fill those supply gaps? And in that way, I think that is a big private sector move because you can partner with community development financial institutions, right? Or other business TA around how to fill these supply gaps in a way that brings equity. And the other thing I'll say that we're really encouraging people to supplement their advocacy, not instead of your professional advocates at VECF and Voices and Virginia Promise Partnership, all super important, but with direct funding to parent and provider-led organizations, because we're finding increasingly that what folks like me who have policy degrees and have studied this for 20 years prescribe as the answer. Those are pretty good answers. We're not dumb people, but when you actually hear the provider or the parent say what they need, it's a little bit different. So we've been investing in grassroots organizing, and some of the things that have arisen from parents, they're really making change. In Georgia, we invested in family child care provider direct organizing. And when you ask them what's the biggest barrier to you ramping up your business, it was local zoning laws and HOA restrictions. And so they're organizing around that in their local area. And then yesterday I was on with some Colorado parent group that deals primarily with immigrant family child care providers, which were key to the supply in Colorado. And they're identifying things that hadn't really come up before, we have training and education in our home countries and it counts for nothing when we get here. We have to go back to the beginning of the line, and then everybody's saying we don't have people with degrees. So I'm not saying you'll have to chase those individual things. I'm more saying that direct investment in parent and provider groups and investment in your advocacy groups would be things that I would think would make some change. And then advocacy. So I don't know, those are some of the things we're thinking about at ECFC. And I mean, I really welcome like ongoing dialogue about the specifics of Virginia. I appreciate y'all letting me listen in.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And also, by the way, I will say if you all aren't yet members of the Early Childhood Funders Collaborative or aren't familiar with it, you should definitely check it out. I'll pop the link into the chat. Robbins is a part of that. And it's a really, really powerful group and useful to be able to learn from our peer states and peer funders as well. So thanks, Shannon. And yeah, I will just say generally as we sort of head for a close here, that the opportunity you've heard over and over again throughout this session, like we have this moment. So while VFN is not yet in the sort of position of doing aligned funding or things like that, if this is an area of interest for you, I would encourage you to reach out to Kathy and Christa after this call and see if you just want to learn more, if you want to go deeper, for the conversation, see ways you can support in your area. I would really encourage that because it really does feel like we have a moment. And something we know about policy change is that it's kind of windows and streams, and those windows slam shut, and it can be a while before they open again. So I really appreciate again all the comments here. So Gary, do you have anything you want to say as we wrap up here?
No, I don't have anything else. Just appreciate everybody's input. I know, like Elliott said earlier, early childhood is very near and dear to our hearts. Probably also even more so with me because I have a toddler who I had to watch and work at home when the child care centers closed down for a little bit. So I'm all for affordable childcare for everyone because I would not wish that on anybody long term. But no, I really look forward to seeing how we can collaborate and partner and to beat that goal. And so just thank you all for joining us this morning.
Great. And then Katie, I think you have the opportunity for any last words and waving goodbye.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. We're so pleased that the Education Funders Network has gotten up and running. This is our second session, and we hope that you will continue to engage with this group and all of VFN's networking groups as we continue our learning journeys across our various issue areas. Big thanks to Elliott and Gary and Patty for putting together today's session, and to all of our expert speakers who joined us today to share their knowledge. We hope to see you guys all at some of our upcoming events. We've got lots going on this fall. And then also just a quick reminder that we are having our very first annual business meeting and anniversary celebration on November 17th. So we hope to see you guys there. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you all real soon.